Hello, I'm Janna, and welcome back to the Crafty Corner. Today, we're going to be diving into some Halloween ideology. This is going to be fun. I absolutely love Halloween ideology, and with the new release that has come out, there are so many tricks and treats to explore. Today, we're going to be altering some Halloween ideology pieces with some Ranger products. If you'd like to see exactly which supplies I'm going to be using, go ahead and pause here. All right, let's head over to the Crafty Corner. Today, we're going to be deep diving into the brand new Tim Holtz Idea-ology. And here is a basket of just a few of the things that we're going to be playing with today. As you can see, we've got all sorts of wonderful Halloween treats. The question is where to start. But of course, we're going to dive right in. So for the first alteration that we are going to be doing today, we're going to be working with some of the Idea-ology tombstones. Now, we're going to alter one of these from the ground up together, and then we'll do a few more alteration tweaks with a few other products. Now, the first thing that I want to add are some of the rub-ons. These rub-ons from 2022 have some absolutely hilarious sentiments. Well, not really sentiments, but little sayings that you can put on the gravestones. And to go with that, of course, I'm going to be needing a rub-on tool. There is a popsicle stick included with these rub-ons, but I prefer to use a rub-on. Oh, and check this out. We're going to be using on the first tombstone the little phrase, "fill dirt." These are just so hilarious. And I'm also going to add a little topper for the upper part of the tombstone. We're just going to quickly snip that out with the tonic snips, and we'll have two little features to add to that tombstone. Okay, good. So we have our pieces. We'll just set the rest of these rub-ons aside and start applying these. So for the application of the rub-ons, I prefer to use the metal Idea-ology rub-on tool. It's metal, so it's going to work very well, and it allows me to press all those fine details onto my substrate. So that is what we're going to be using. Okay. So first things first, we need to peel the backings off of the rub-ons, and then we are going to carefully line that up with the tombstone and stick it down. I love these sayings. We've got "fill dirt." That is cute. So we're just going to place that down, and I'm going to try to hold it with one finger. Well, you kind of have to, otherwise these can be a little bit slippery. And we're just going to press with the rub-on tool until we see the rub-on kind of removing itself from the plastic. You're going to kind of notice the color goes from dark to rather pale, and that means that you've gotten the piece to transfer. And then we're just going to carefully lift up the corner, make sure that everything is successfully transferred before we take that off. And there we go. We've got "fill dirt." So next I want to take that little teeny tiny piece, and we're going to stick that to the top of the tombstone for a little bit of added decoration. I love all these fun details that we can add to the stone and give them our own customized look. So many options, so much fun. Okay, we've got that in place, and we're just going to quickly rub that down and then peel off the backing and see what we've got. Okay, and peeling that off. Oh, looks like we need to rub just a little bit more. There we go. And there is our finishing detail. Now let's go ahead and check out some of the other tombstones that I had altered earlier and see which little sayings we added to those. Okay, let's pull them in. So we've got "no regrets," "no escape," "I'm a goner," and "stupidity." That last one was "stupidity" is my absolute favorite. And let's check out these other two as well. We've got "I need a shovel" and "Theo later." As you can see with this one, we've already added a little bit of crypt paste to that. And I want to go in and add more crypt paste to the rest of these. This grit paste crypt paste is absolutely amazing. And I'm going to be using up the little mini jar that this was first released in, because these things don't last forever and you don't want your product to dry out. So let's go ahead and start scooping. We can be pretty generous with the crypt paste, and we want to just cover these and make them look as grungy and gritty as possible. Now, this crypt paste is definitely a little older, but not a big deal. I'm just going to go in with my finger and I'm going to press it down, and it's still going to work beautifully. Okay, so we're just going to go through and we're going to add crypt paste to all of these, and then we'll let them dry, and I'll see how it looks after. But as we saw in that first tombstone, when it dries, we get this really cool kind of grungy, mossy look. It almost has like a little bit of greenish tint, which is very awesome. So for now, I'm just going to scrape this on here, and I'll continue to push that down with my fingers until I'm happy with the grit crypt paste coverage. Here are our finished tombstones. These are going to look so gritty when they dry. That's going to be awesome. Now let's move on and alter some of these cute little pumpkins. These are fantastic. I love them the way they are, but I feel like we could go a little more glitz with a little bit more grunge. So we're pulling in Foundry Wax Statue to add a little bit of shine to these fantastic pumpkins. So we're going to give that Foundry Wax a good shake. Make sure that everything's nicely incorporated, and then we're going to put a little bit onto the media mat. So we're just going to squeeze a bit out right here. Okay, and then we're just going to take a paintbrush and we're going to kind of dry brush that onto the pumpkins, because we don't need a whole lot on them, but we just need enough to give it just a little bit of gild and shine. Okay, so we've got a paintbrush. This one I have pretty much dedicated to all things Foundry Wax, so it's definitely a little bit wild and untamed. So we're just going to carefully brush that along the ridges. Not really trying for full coverage. I just want to kind of hit the highlights on the pumpkins. Then we'll just set that down and move on to the next one. So it doesn't take a whole lot of Foundry Wax when adding this to the pumpkins. We just kind of need to do a little bit of a dip, and then I'm just lightly flicking across the top and then along the sides in order to get that little bit of added shine. Okay, and we'll just keep rotating. Now I have to work relatively quickly because the Foundry Wax on the table is already starting to dry out. Foundry Wax dries very quickly, and when it does dry, it becomes kind of dusty and a little bit flaky. It's not like paint that sticks once you stick it on there. It needs the heat in order to really adhere to the object that we are using. In this case, these pumpkins are made out of a resin, which is a form of plastic. So just got one more to paint, and then we're going to bring in the heat tool and we will start blasting them. Oh, and of course, I needed to alter a few of the candlesticks. These are a great antique silver, but I want to grunge these up a bit more, and I want to give it that vintage goldenish shine. So we're just going to add some more of the statue Foundry Wax to these, and then grunge them up. In this case, I am completely covering the candlestick with the Foundry Wax. These I want completely covered. So we're applying a fairly thick layer here. Okay. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. And we've got one more. So as you can see, that Foundry Wax is drying fast, so I need to move quickly to make sure I get that onto the candlestick before everything starts getting flaky. Okay. Pretty good. Just a little bit more in the edges, and we're going to have to call that pretty much done, because that Foundry Wax has dried and is definitely starting to become a little bit dusty. If I keep brushing the Foundry Wax on after it has gotten too dry and dusty, then I'm actually going to be in danger of rubbing the Foundry Wax that I've put on off the candlestick. So it's a little bit of a balancing act and timing. Now we just wipe up the little bit of dust on the mat, and now we can emboss. Here I'm going to be embossing with a Sizzix embossing tool. So here are our results. We've got that beautiful vintage shine on here now, adding a little touch of magic to our altered pieces. In this case, candlesticks and pumpkins. Now we need to grunge these up a bit. They're just a little bit too bright. So to do that, of course, we're going to be using some walnut stain crayon. We're just going to scribble directly onto the pumpkin, and I'm going to be smushing that in with my fingers. Now, if you didn't want to smush directly with your fingers, you could easily scribble some of the distressed crayon off to the side and then apply it with a slightly damp brush. But because of all these ridges, I really want to be able to use my fingers to push that darker color right into the ridges of the pumpkin. So we're just going to keep scribbling and we'll smush that in. There we go. And the nice thing is we're not even really losing any of that shine. It's just kind of accenting those ridge lines. So that is pretty good. All right. Definitely happy with this. Walnut stain is definitely the perfect go-to for adding a grungy, distressed look to projects. And I absolutely love this for altering ideology. It just gives it that really good grungy look. Okay, so this is the last pumpkin that we're altering. Then we're going to turn our attention to the candlesticks and we're going to do pretty much the same thing. I'm just going to directly scribble and then we will smush that around with fingers to get that grunge look. Okay. Pumpkins are looking pretty good. Happy with that. On to the candlesticks. So, scribble and smudge. That is grunging up so nicely and doesn't even take too much crayon. Just a little bit of a scribble, a little bit of a smudge, and you've got that really good look. Okay. I think we're about done. That is looking good and grungy. All right. So these are our finished alterations with Distress Foundry Wax and a dash of Distress Walnut Stain Crayon. Now let's move on to our next alteration. Here we're going to be pulling in some of these spiders from Idea-ology Adornments. Now to alter these fun little spiders, we're going to be needing some Distress Nightfall Glitter and some glossy accents. We're going to turn these plain little spiders into some sparkly spiders. I'm also going to be grabbing my squeezers from Sizzix. That way I have an easy way to dunk the spiders into that beautiful nightfall glitter. So first, we're going to get our squeezers out, and I'm just going to add a spider onto the end. Now for my glossy accents, to prevent the nozzle from getting jammed, I put a little tack into that. All right, now we're just needing a little dot on the back of the spider, just like that, not too much. And then we can take that with the squeezers and dunk it directly into the glitter. Okay, we've got a grip on the spider and dunk. Just a little dunk and we just tap that off and see what we've got. Oh, yep, that is nice and sparkly. So we're just going to set this little spider aside to dry and we will take care of the remaining spiders. Now I found that the glossy accents on average for me takes about 20 to 30 minutes to dry. And of course, this drying time is going to vary depending on your location. Don't forget, humidity, dry heat, and all those other fun elements can affect your drying time. Okay, dunking that next spider, tapping it off, and taking a look. Oh, so sparkly. Absolutely love that nightfall glitter. Wish I could get a bucket of that stuff. I would absolutely put it on everything. It's got such great shine. Okay, there we go. Another spider, and set it aside. So we're just going to grab that last spider, add a dash of glossy accents, and then dip it. There we go. And dunking the last spider. That glitter sparkles like black diamonds. It is so, so good. Okay, so we need to let these spiders dry. And before we do, let's take a nice close-up of this one. That looks so cool. I just love the glitter on there. It adds such a wonderful Halloween touch. Okay, now let's let them dry. Next, we're going to be altering some of the Tim Holtz Drippy Candles. Drippy Candles are so fun, and we're going to be altering these with some walnut stained crayon and some distress paint brushed pewter. I've got a little brush off to the side, and we're just going to brush on a little bit of the distress paint onto these candles. I'm kind of going for a bit of a creepy, ghostly look by turning these candles silver. So I'm just going to dry brush that on, and not trying for complete perfect coverage, just enough to give it a silvery sheen. Okay, not bad. Add just a little bit more. Now, the distress paint, I find this dries very quickly, and by quickly, I mean like 2 to 3 minutes at most, if we're just applying a light coat. So, let's go ahead and alter that second candle. We're just going to dip and brush. There we go. We're getting that nice silver finish over the top. And after we've got that done, then we're going to want to go in with the distress crayon to get a more grungy look going. Okay. Pretty good. Definitely happy with that. Touching this one up just a little bit. And now, let's move on to the next step. So we're just going to take some distress crayon and we're going to smush that over the drippy candle. And again, I'm just going to rub this in with my fingers. If you wanted to, you could absolutely use a damp paintbrush instead. But again, this has a whole lot of ridges, and I want to make sure that we're getting that crayon smushed into all of those detailed corners. Okay, smushing that around, pressing it in. Ooh, that is getting good and grungy. Okay, so that one is looking pretty good. Now I am going to show you what I would do if I was using a brush. This is one of the Tim Holtz stencil brushes, and you can just use that to push the crayon around. I like to add like a little bit of water off to the side so that I can more easily move the distress crayon. Okay, and we're just going to finish that off with a few more darker spots in a few places. There. Definitely good. Next, let's attach our candles to our candlesticks. And to do that, I'm going to be pulling in some gel super glue. We just need a little bit on the base of each candle, and then we can stick them right onto the candlesticks. I like the gel super glue the best because it holds its shape and it doesn't get all drippy on me. And that means it's just that much easier to apply to objects and get everything to stay in place. So just a little bit on the base of the candle, don't need too much. And I'm adding just a teeny drop to the candle stick as well. And we'll just stick that down. Good. And let's get the other one. Adding our glue. Just a little bit. And now a candle. Okay. So we have a couple of our candles now on candlesticks. That will be a great prop. Okay, now on to the next step. For the next step, we're going to be adding some additional drips to these candles so that the wax is going to look like it's spilling out over the edge of the candlestick. To do this, I'm using a Sure Bonder hot glue gun. Now, very slowly and carefully, I am dripping hot glue down the side of each of the candlesticks. This is going to simulate melted wax. And I have to do this in a couple of layers because it takes a little bit of time for the hot glue to dry. So I want to do a very slow drip so that the hot glue will dry just like melted wax. Now we're going to be working our way around each of the candles, adding drips here and there. Then we will alter these drips with some distress paint afterwards, and of course add a bit more distress crayon. All right, let's go ahead and add these drips. So here are our drippy candles with added drips. Not bad, but we need to get that hot glue to look more like the melty candle. To do that, we're going to be using some antique linen and a dash of the brushed pewter distress paint. So we're just taking a brush and we're going to paint those waxy drips. That way we have a way better color match. So I'm just going around the edges with a small paintbrush and painting anything that is hot glue. Okay, so we're just going to keep turning that. We'll keep adding the paint. And it's not going to really matter if we go over some of the paint that we already did. This can easily be blended out with a bit more distress crayon and brushed pewter. The main thing is to just get that layer on and get it dry so that we can finish up this alteration. Okay, so just carefully going over those little spaces. I really do like how those drips turned out. The hot glue gives such an organic look when it flows, and the dried glue at the end, it really does look like melted wax. It's pretty cool. Now, I learned about this particular technique while watching one of the many Tim Holtz live specials. There was the one where we made the original drippy candles. That was out of rolled cardstock and distress paint. And then he also did the video where we added the extra waxy drips. So I'm very grateful to learn these techniques. So fun. Okay, so it looks like we've pretty much got all of our paint on here. These need a moment to dry, and then we can go over with that second layer of brushed pewter. There we go, wiping up our little paint mess and getting the brushed pewter out. So giving that a very good shake, and then we're going to just place that down directly onto the craft mat. Don't need a lot, just a few drops. There we go, and now we can start brushing that onto the candles to get our blend. So just going very light, very quick over those painted areas, and hopefully this is going to blend out nicely and you won't be able to tell where the original candle and our added drips combines. Okay, pretty good. I'm liking the look of this, but I'm definitely thinking it's going to need a layer of distress crayon. The distress crayon will give it that extra added grunge. Okay, so these are good. Now we're going to add that extra layer of grunge with the Distress Walnut Stain Crayon. To do this, I decided to go in with one of the blending brushes. I have some Distress Crayon scribbled off to the side that I then spritzed with a bit of water. I then twisted the brush through the sludge, and now I'm just brushing on that extra layer of Distress Crayon. Because the hot glue is a little bit more delicate, I didn't want to have to smush that into my fingers, but I still wanted that really good grunge. Okay, now on to our next alteration. Here we're going to be altering a whole package of bubbles. I love bubbles. These are a seasonal thing and I can't get enough of them. I usually get 2 to 3 packs every year. They are really that good. Now we're going to need quite a few bubbles for the big project that I have in mind that you will learn about next week. But let's go ahead and just start the alteration. So we're taking a good handful of bubbles. I'm looking for the really big ones, and we're just going to dump this into this plastic bin. That's how many bubbles I'm going to be using. We've got all of these, and I'm going to use most of the other package as well. But I'm really aiming for the larger and medium-sized bubbles. Okay, I've got room in the tin. We'll just empty these in. Hopefully not too many of these run away. All right, and again, we'll just scoop out the larger ones. Good. And I need to make sure I save 2 of the really big ones for another alteration. Okay. That should possibly be enough bubbles. Let's get that little one that tried to escape. All right. Pretty good. So we're going to be altering these with some Ranger Tim Holtz alcohol ink. And the alcohol ink that I'm going to be using for this alteration is going to be the beautiful dark purple Vineyard. This purple is one of my absolute favorite alcohol ink colors for Halloween. It's very spooky and very mysterious. It's definitely got some ominous Twilight vibes going as well. So I dropped in a few drips, and I'm using part of the packaging as a lid while I shake up this container with all of those bubbles in it. We want to shake this up good and make sure that all of the bubbles get a nice coating of purple ink. And we're just going to kind of shake it, rattle it around, make sure that everything is going to be coated. Now, the plastic container is going to be really easy to clean. I can just spritz this with some rubbing alcohol when I'm done. And it just happened to be the right size for this massive amount of bubbles that I need to make. Okay, let's take a look. Ooh, that is good. That is such a wicked purple color. I love it. Okay, so we'll just set those off to the side. They're going to need about a minute or so to dry. Not too much time, but they are just a little bit damp and tacky from the resins within the alcohol ink. And we do want that to have a moment to dry off. Oh my word, that purple is just too good. Absolutely love it. And that is a whole lot of bubbles. All right, next I need to quickly get my container clean because we're going to be doing a second color. All I need is a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and we can just wipe that container clean. So I have some isopropyl in this little spritz bottle. Just going to give that a few spritzes, and then I can just wipe that out with a cloth. There we go. Nice and easy, no fuss, no muss. Nice and squeaky clean. So we need to dye a few more bubbles in another color. Let's just finish cleaning out the container. That looks pretty good. And we'll grab a few more of the bubbles from the bin. I've been using one of the Tim Holtz Idea-ology containers as a little storage bin. I love the vintage vibe of the containers, and those are just the right size for bubbles. So we're just going to add more bubbles to the container. I want to make sure I get 2 of those large ones because we're going to be making another set of ghost lights. Okay. And we'll want some other bubbles for a potion. Okay, that should be a good amount of bubbles. Now we're going to color this with some Citrus Ranger alcohol ink. So we just need a couple of drops in here and then put that to work and shake this up. All right, a couple of drips. That looks good. And just giving this a little shake. Don't really need a lid on this one. I've only got a few bubbles in here, and it's just going to take a few gentle shakes to get everything nice and colored. I think I want a little bit more intense color, so adding a few more drips, giving it another shake, and let's see what we have. Ah, there we go. Now we're getting a wonderfully witchy green color. Perfect. So again, I'll need to let these dry for a little bit, and then they'll be ready to create with. Check out all these bubbles. This is what about a package and a half of bubbles look like. All right, now on to a quick, easy alteration with some mummy cloth. So we're going to pull some of this off of the card, and we're going to be altering this with some black soot distress spray. So we're just going to untuck that, unravel a little bit. There we go. And of course, then we'll just snip that off with some tonic snips. Now we're going to need some water. I'm going to take the mummy cloth and we're just going to be crumpling that up on the desk. And I want to be spritzing that with some water from the Distress Mister. That way, when we spray it with the Distress Spray Stain, it will have some water so it can wick and carry that ink all through the cloth. All right. And a few spritzes with the Distress Spray Stain, and I'm just going to mop up my surface, try to get as much of that ink on there as we can. Looks like we're going to need a little bit more, probably some more water to make this a bit more absorbent. Kind of just tossing that, seeing where we're at with color. Okay, a couple more spritzes. There we go, that's starting to look better. Okay, and again, we'll just kind of mop that around, make sure we're picking up all that color. Not bad. And we'll need a little bit of water, and I'm also going to start drying this off with the Ranger heat tool. It doesn't take much, so that's really nice, but I'm just kind of still turning this over and trying to make sure that I've got good coverage. I'm not really going for too much of a splotchy look. So I want to get all of those fibrous fabric pieces covered. All right. And then we're just going to let that dry with a bit of encouragement from the heat tool. Okay, that is looking pretty dry. Let's set that aside and move on to the next alteration. So now we're going to be altering one of these fantastic skulls. That is cool. The detail is pretty amazing. It's already pretty grungy, but of course you can always go grungier. Now I want to highlight those empty eye sockets with some stickles, and this is Black Diamond Stickles by Ranger. So we're also going to need some Distress Walnut Stain Crayon, and we're going to want to pick this up and start by spritzing off to the side so that I can get some of that crayon onto a brush, and then we're just going to kind of paint that and pounce that on, and hopefully that's going to be mucking this up good. I want the skull to kind of look like it just fell out of a grave. Ooh, there we go. A little bit of chunky bits, a little bit of distress wash. Yeah, this is going to look good. All right. Not bad, and I am going to go directly onto it with a little bit more Distress Crayon to kind of put some emphasis on the teeth and around the eye sockets. There we go. Now it's getting good and grungy. Okay. Ooh. Pressing that right into some of that detail. Definitely good. Loving the grunge today. All right. Thinking I'm pretty happy with this. Now we're going to need to grab the stickles and start adding them to the skull. So we're going to be adding the Ranger Black Diamond Stickles, and I'm just going to take the cap off this, and we're going to squirt some of the stickles directly into those eye cavities, and that's going to come out kind of like in a gel consistency, but it's going to dry, and we're going to have this fantastic black sparkly glitter with just a touch of hollow in there, so that's going to give it a nice creepy look. Okay, pretty good. We're going to set this aside and let it dry. For our next alteration, we're going to be altering a paper doll with a bit of Distress Mica Spray Stain. Now, we're going to be using some Ominous Twilight and Iron Gate. The paper dolls are definitely a slick surface, and applying this directly on here can be a little tricky. But I have found that if I apply a thin layer of the mica spray stain with a water brush, and then I zap this pretty quickly with a heat tool, I am able to build up some layers of color and still keep that fantastic shine. This takes just a little bit of patience, and I think the results are worth it. Okay, so we're just going to go in with the heat tool. We're going to quickly dry that off. And as I'm drying, I'm going to keep painting. And as this dries, it is going to somehow stick to the paper doll, which is very good because I really, really, really like that sparkle and shine. I might be able to do this with the Distress crayons, but I find that the spray stain with the mica in it just has a little bit more punch when it comes to all that super fun sparkle. Here are the finished results with the Distress Mica Spray Stain on the Tim Holtz paper doll. Okay, now this paper doll is going to need some creepy bat wings, and we're going to be using some of the Distress Ranger Crackle Paste. We're just going to take some of the crackle paste, and I'm just going to smush that onto the wings with a palette knife. This is hopefully going to give us a really fun crackle that I can later go over the top with some Distress crayon. All right, lifting our press and seal, taking a little scoop. That stuff is just a little bit dry. It's probably getting end of shelf life, but we should still be okay. If we smush this down in a fairly thin layer, I'm confident that we can still get some of the wonderful cracks on here. All right, just pushing that down, making sure that we're going different directions. Okay. Now, the paste is definitely going to dry clear. It just happens to come out of the container white, but it will be transparent after the drying time. And drying time for this, I've found, well, for lower Quebec, it's a bit humid, so we're looking at a good 30 minutes easily. And this is one thing that we don't want to force with the heat tool. The heat tool will take away all that fun, crackly bits. So it is much better to let this naturally air dry. Okay, so wings are covered. Just smushing that a little bit around. And we'll go ahead and set this aside, and we'll be back in a little bit to see how this has shaped up. Okay, let's take a look. Ooh, not bad. We've definitely got some interesting cracks going on here. So we're just going to want some of the Distress Walnut Stain Crayon. I'm going to scribble directly on the wings, and then I'm going to use my fingers to smush that around to highlight all of that wonderful texture. That came out pretty good. Definitely happy with the effect. So here are our completed bat wings. I love the creepy look that they've got. Next, we're just going to take a dash of Collage Medium so that we can stick these to the back of our paper doll. Okay, lining things up. Ooh, that has definitely got some good creepy vibes going on. I love it. Very, very fun. Okay, on to our next alteration. So we're going to be featuring one of the brand new Tim Holtz Idea-ology Holiday and Halloween snow globes. We're going to be altering the base, and this is going to be a pretty simple and straightforward alteration. We're just going to be applying some black soot paint directly onto the base, and we're just going to paint it. Sometimes the simplest of alterations can make the biggest of impacts on a project. Never underestimate a good coat of paint. So as we can see, the cork is very absorbent, so I'm painting fast, trying to get good coverage all around. Okay, and we'll just work our way around the base and make sure that everything is covered up so none of that brown cork is showing. For this project, it's going to be all about the gloomy, dark colors. Okay, I'm just going to finish painting that and work our way around the base. There we go. Nice and easy. So this is going to now need to dry. Next, we're going to be altering some of this wonderful reptile embossed paper. And to do that, we're going to be using some of the new Pearlescent Distress Crayon, Phantom Mist. Again, this too is a pretty easy alteration. Take black paper, run it through the embossing folder, and then smudge on a color of pearlescent crayon. It's going to give that a wonderful pearly shine, and we're going to be able to highlight some of the detail of that folder. Now, this is the reptile folder, but I find that it looks like a very worn cobblestone path, and I think that's going to be just perfect for the setting of our spooky scenes. Okay, scribbling it down and rubbing all of that beautiful Phantom Mist crayon in. I've got to say, Phantom Mist is probably my absolute new favorite, though I'd have to say that Ominous Twilight might be tied. I don't know, there's so many good new colors this year. So much fun and so many wonderful possibilities for creation. Oh, and check out that texture. I swear, the detail on these folders gets better and better. That is pretty good. So we have this alteration down. Let's see what's next. With our cobblestone texture, aka reptile, completed, let's go ahead and attach this to our base. The base is going to become the foundation of a future project you are going to discover about next week. So we're just taking a big scoop of the collage medium and we're applying this to a etc. thick board piece. Now, this is from the new Etc. pieces, and these foundational pieces are wonderful to work with. So many options. You could be using this as a wall plaque, you could be using it as a backer, and in this case, I'm going to be using it as a stage. It's going to be the platform that I'm going to be setting my entire spooky scene on top of. So we're just getting that collage medium spread all around, and then we're going to be attaching our textured altered paper. Okay, we've got that good foundation. Just kind of trying to get the extra collage medium off my hands. Good. And we're just going to stick that right down. That texture is just so good. I absolutely love it. And we'll stick the other piece right next to it. Now, the collage medium dries relatively quickly, so we're talking easily under 5 minutes. So, just going to stick that down, wait a little bit, and then I will trim off the edges. But doesn't that reptile look so good? That's got this wonderful stone vibe, and with a little bit of added Phantom Mist mica crayon, we have got a really good foundation to work on. Now we're going to be adding some grit paste medium onto this. This is going to give some more texture and add to our grungy, gritty feel. So we're just going to go ahead, we're going to scoop this out, we're going to be super generous, and we're just going to smash this down all over the edges. I kind of want to have this grit and stone feel going on this foundation. So just with the palette knife, we're just going to smush that all out, cover our edges, and get some great texture on here. So just scraping and pushing that in. Now the grit paste, crypt paste, this I'm going to find takes about an average of 30 minutes to 40 to dry. And since I am applying in this in a fairly thick layer, it could take up to an hour. But it's totally 100% worth it because of the effects that we can achieve with this. Okay, so smushing more of that down and just pressing it in. Ooh, that stuff is just too good. I am so happy that it now comes in the larger containers. We've now got the 3 fluid ounce containers, and that works out really well. Okay, so going around the edges, pressing that down. I'm kind of trying to do like the grit paste all around the edge, and then I'm kind of leaving the middle part open, kind of like center stage. But I just want all that texture to be in there. Just going to add more to the spooky vibe of this. Okay, so all in all, not too bad. Let's see, do I want more texture paste? Yes, I do. We want some more of that off to the left. There we go. And I'm not really worrying about like smoothing this out. It's kind of going to be a little bit rough and bumpy and uneven, and that's just going to add to the whole feel. All right. Pretty good. So I'm feeling pretty happy with the distribution and coverage of this. So we're just going to be setting this foundation aside so that it can dry. And then we'll come back later and see how the crypt paste has transformed. All right, let's move on to our next alteration. For our next alteration, we're going to be pulling in some of these fantastic thick board spider webs. This is from the Etc. line, and this can be found at Stampers Anonymous. They make these and they're fabulous. Now to alter this, we're going to be wanting some glossy accents and some more nightfall glitter. I'm just going to add a little bit of the glossy accents onto here, and then we're just going to smudge that around with our finger so that we can get fairly even coverage. There, got the glossy accents, and now we're just going to smudge that out. So off to the side, I do have a piece of scrap paper because we're going to have to put this down onto scrap paper, and then I will directly pour the nightfall glitter over the top. We want to be very generous with the glitter, so we're just going to dump it on. Okay, unscrewing the lid, and now we get to add all of that beautifully sparkly glitter. So just dumping it. And that's okay. We've got the paper in there, and we can easily tip the rest of that right back into the jar. All right, lifting that up and giving that a little gentle tap. Ooh, so sparkly. Good. And of course, we'll have to let this sit aside and dry. I'm estimating about 15 to 20 minutes on that piece. So let's go ahead. We'll take all of that beautiful Nightfall glitter and gently tip that right back into the jar. There we go. Another nice and easy alteration. Now we are going to be altering some of the Tim Holtz Idea-ology layers. And this is from this year's Halloween set. And we're going to just be painting the curtains on these beautiful stage pieces a vibrant purple. Of course, I had to pull in some ominous twilight. So again, we're dealing with a slick surface, so this doesn't stick the best to it. But as I have found, if we do a thin layer and blast it with a heat tool, it is possible to get the mica spray stain to stick to this otherwise slick surface. I have heard that you could add a coat of collage medium first and then paint this on, but I prefer to use my heat tool trick in order to add color. And as you can see, we're getting some beautiful, vibrant curtains. All right, moving on. Now we have some window frames. And these, we want to add a bit more grit and grunge. So I'm going to be pulling in some crackle paste. We're just going to take a palette knife and we're going to scrape the crackle paste onto different parts of the windows. I'm going to be relatively haphazard with this. This is supposed to be a bit random. And since this crackle paste is the opaque, we're going to come back and alter it after this has dried with a bit of, you guessed it, more Distress Walnut Stain crayon. Seriously, I can't get enough of the walnut stain crayon, and I'm so grateful that every now and then Ranger has overstock of walnut stain and you can buy single walnut stain crayons. Honestly, last order for walnut stain crayon came up to a total of 6 crayons in one shot. I go through a lot of the stuff, so it's really good to have extra on hand. Okay, so we're just continuing to scrape on the crackle paste, and this is going to dry and we're going to get that really awesome crackle. All right, just carefully kind of scraping this along. Want to make sure you've got good coverage. Yeah, this is going to work out very nicely. Now, crackle paste, again, this one's kind of hard to tell because it's kind of thick and you have to wait for all the good crackly bits to appear. But my best guess on drying time is probably going to be 30 to 40 minutes. Again, these things will vary depending on your location. Quebec, especially lower Quebec, hot, humid, and just a bit damp at times. Okay, and we are back, and check out the crackle. That looks awesome. So we're going to take some walnut crayon, we're going to scribble it off to the side, and we're using the craft matte portion of the media mat. We're going to spritz it, and then with the blending brush tool, we're going to just brush all of that walnut stain goodness directly onto the window stain. So this is going to give us a good grungy feel. The white is going to get grungier, and hopefully we're going to get a little buildup of the walnut stain crayon in between all of those fantastic crackly bits. Next, we're going to be adding some of these wonderful shattered glass acetate pieces behind the window frames. This is going to add a whole nother layer of spooky goodness to this alteration. So again, this is a nice easy one. All we need is some collage medium, and we're just going to squeeze some of that out of the bottle, and we're going to frame the window frame. So not too much, just a little bit, enough to make everything stick. We're just going to apply that down and then add that shattered glass acetate. That shattered glass acetate is just too cool. I love the details on it. I love the jaggedy bits. It is simple, yet effective and fun. Okay, just choosing which way we want this to go. That's looking good. Let's go ahead and stick it down. As you can see, this is going to be just a little bit too big, but not a big deal. This is pretty easy to trim, and we can do that once the glue has had an opportunity to set. All right, let's go ahead and alter that next frame. And here we go. These are our 2 altered frames. Those look so cool with all of that crackle and the shattered acetate glass behind them. This is going to be a great addition to our project. So many fun alterations. That concludes our alterations for this year's Tim Holtz 2023 Idea-ology. There were so many fun parts and pieces to work with. I had a blast altering with a variety of different distress mediums to give these a whole new spooky look. I hope that you've enjoyed this little dive into the world of Tim Holtz Halloween Idea-ology. And until next time, happy crafting!